Hello guys, I thought it was necessary to redo this video because when I first made it was a time when I primarily used fixed prices and didn't have much experience with custom prices. Now that I've been using all custom prices, I think this video could be much better for you guys. Now, TSM auctioning is the aspect of TSM where you tell the add-on how you want it to sell your items. After you've made your group and put the items in the group, which was covered in our groups video, the next step is to set up TSM to sell those items in that group. Click on the group here that you want to use, and then under the auctioning section, hit Create New Operation here. Give the operation whatever name you want. Okay, before I get into custom prices, I do have to cover fixed prices because there will be some situations where you might want to use fixed prices, but most of this video is going to be covering custom prices. So let's just get this out of the way now. All you got to do is go in here and go into your minimum price, and you select whatever your minimum price you want it to be for that group. So imagine that that's going to be 100 gold, and let's say our normal price, let's say we want that to be 250 gold. And then this one here for maximum price, maybe we want 350 gold. So that's our price range right there. Our lowest that we're willing to sell items in this group is going to be 100 gold. The normal price we want to sell that is around 250. And the maximum we're willing to sell is 350. So 100 to 350 gold, that's our price range. Outside of that, you got to tell TSM what you want it to do, and that's the options over right here. So you select what you want it to do when the auctions are below minimum price. Same thing when it's above maximum price. When other people have them posted above 350 gold, what do you want it to do? Do you want it to post at maximum price, post at normal price, not post at all? You select whatever options you want to choose, and depending on the items in the group and the situation, it's going to be different. There's no one size fits all for any of this stuff. Okay, there's a couple other things I have to run through really quick so you guys see that they're here and you definitely make use of them before I can get into custom pricing, because I don't want to cover any of that once I get there. Okay, so up here you can select a time frame you want to post the auctions in this particular group that it's applied to. You just select if you want 12, 24, 48 hours. You have to decide what you want. Stack size, so if you wanted to post 5 stacks of 20, you would put 20 in here and you would put 5 up here. If you wanted to post 10 singles, you would put 1 here and you would put 10 up here. So just make sure you understand what stack size and post cap is. And then for keep quantity, there might be some situations where you might always want to keep one of an item in your bags, like blacksmithing, hammers, spanners, and different things that you need to have in your bags to craft stuff with your professions. You might be selling them on the auction house, but you still need to keep one in your bags. That's a really good feature. And then you have some options what you want to include in your keep quantity. You've got, you can allow a partial stack if you want. Down here for max expires, you can set it to say, for example, be 10. So if you're posting a certain transmog piece and it expired 10 times in a row and it is not sold, then if you had this set to 10, it would stop posting it. So that would be a clue to you that maybe you want to disenchanted vendor it or whatever. So you decide if you want to use that or not. And then over here on the general tab, you can put in blacklisted players if you like. I don't use that function. Use it if you want. You can use match stack size. That's also a really good function you can use. It will apply to some groups more so than others. You'll have to decide that for yourself. And this is a neat feature over here, ignore low duration auctions. So there might be some situations where you're going to the auction house and you're trying to post your stuff up there and somebody has something posted really cheap and it's about to expire in the next 30 minutes. You don't want to go in and undercut that, that really cheap single auction that's just going to be gone shortly. You can just ignore those really cheap ones that are going to be going away soon and just get things kind of back on track and in a normal price range again. It's kind of like a mini sort of reset, pull the prices back up. So this is a great feature that you guys can use if you like it. And then cancel scans. So you can decide if you want the items in this group to be included in your cancel scans or not included in your cancel scans. So if there's certain items I have on the auction list that I don't really care too much about and I don't even want to bother reposting them, I just know that they're at a good price, they sell anyway, and they're fairly cheap, and I just kind of want to leave them there and not deal with them. But then in other situations, you might have things that are really expensive or Legion materials or stuff that, you know, might be a little bit more expensive and you want to pay closer attention. You want to make sure that you're always the cheapest on the auction house. Then you want those to be included in your cancel scan. So you have to decide what you want to be included and not included in your cancel scans. The reset and relationships, I'm going to have to make a separate video entirely related to those because that will take too much time to cover right now. And then management, in here you can either just delete the operation, you can duplicate it. If you've made this operation with custom prices and you just want to save yourself time and trouble, you can just copy it and then just change the stack size, just give it a slightly different name, and then you can adjust the stack size or how many you want to post, and you keep all of the rules that you've built in your custom prices. That's a really neat feature. I use that all the time. If you want to ignore certain servers or certain characters, you can put that in there, and then it'll also show you a list of all of the groups that are using this specific operation that you're looking at right now. Okay, so now we're ready to start getting into some custom prices. We've covered the basics, so let's get into the meat of what I really wanted to cover in this video. So the first thing, if you wanted to make a custom price and you went in here and you decide, okay, I'm going to start making custom prices. Well, what's a custom price? What do I use? What are the words? What are the references? What's going on here? I don't know how to do this. So as soon as you click into this box, you'll see a window pop up over here that gives you some examples of different things that you can do. And it says right here, type /TSM sources to print out all available price sources. So we're going to go and we're going to do that right now. All right, so let's type in /TSM sources, see what we get here. And there we go. There's a list of all the sources that we can use in our custom prices. Alright guys, instead of typing /TSM sources in-game, you can also come straight to the TradeSkill Master website and you'll get a list of all of that stuff on here along with some examples of how to use it. So if you want to use this resource, I'll have a link to it in the description of the video. I'm just going to slowly scroll down through it so you can kind of see what's here and decide whether or not you want to go there for yourself. Okay guys, of all the different price sources you see on my screen here, the one that has to be covered first is DB Market, and that's because a lot of the other price sources are feeding off of information coming from DB Market. So it's really essential that you guys understand what DB Market is. And DB Market is going to be giving you values related to prices on your specific server only, not other people's server, just your server. And it's a weighted average over the last 14 days, but favors the last few days. Now, how they actually come up with this number is very complicated in some ways. If you're inclined to know, you can just go to their TradeSkill Master website and they explain exactly how they're coming up with this number. I'll have a link to this in the description of the video, but if you really want to know, you can read through and understand exactly what they're doing to come up with this number. It's very smart how they've done it, and it works out very, very well pretty much all of the time. The other important thing you need to understand is the difference between region and global prices. So let's talk about region first. So if you're an EU player, then region price is the average of DB Market over all EU realms as of the last update. So it doesn't include any US information because it's specific to EU servers because it's for EU players. Now the opposite is true for US. So if you're NA or US, the region price is the average of DB Market over all US realms as of the last update. So global pricing is going to be the average of those two numbers we just talked about, the region market average of EU and the region market average of US. Those averaged together is going to give you global. So global is including everything, all of EU, all of US, everything all together. Now, historical data is referencing data over the last 60 days, and because we've already explained what DB Market is and the difference between global and region, now you understand three different price sources that are referencing historical data. Now, region sale average and global sale average is from the TSM app users accounting data. Mid buyout gets pricing updates every 25 to 30 minutes for EU, and if you're US, updates every 35 to 40 minutes. Now, I never use this information in my own custom prices for selling, and that's because minimum buyout, it can be extremely high 1 hour, extremely low the next hour. It can be a normal price the next hour. The price is just all over the place. It's not stable. It's just craziness. So it is good to refer to tooltips to see, what was the value the last time it did the update, so you kind of keep up to date on information. But actually using it in its custom prices when you're selling things, I think can be quite dangerous. So I wouldn't encourage you to do it unless you really know what you're doing and you have functions in there that are going to stabilize it so you're not making big mistakes. All right, and for the rest of the price sources that you see on the screen, I don't think I need to cover them. It looks pretty straightforward and it shouldn't really need any more explanation. All right, so it's time to get into custom pricing, but of course we're going to start with some very simple basic custom prices first, and we'll work into some more creative ones a little later on. So this would be an example of a very basic custom price. So the first thing I want to mention is when you're saying 100% of DB market, that is DB market, that's market value. 100% is referencing that value, that normal price range. So when you're saying 80% of DB market, that's 20% cheaper than market value on your server. When you're saying 125% DB market, that means 25% higher than market value. So your frame of reference and your default position is 100% DB market. So you always want to be, your minimum price is usually going to be a little bit below 100%, and your maximum price is usually going to be a little bit above 100%, unless you're trying to be like really aggressive and you're out farming tons of mats and you just want to sell them really quickly. You might be willing to sell them a lower than market value. So you could have, for your minimum, you could have like 60 or 70%, and for your normal price, you could have 80%, and then maximum, you could have like 95%. That would sell your stuff really quickly because you're well below market value on your server. So depending on what your style is and what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to be doing this kind of stuff a little bit different. But this is a good starting frame of reference for you guys. All right, so now we're going to start combining some of the operations, again, keeping it quite simple. So right here, all it's doing is it's averaging DB market, which of course is your server, along with the DB market average across all of EU if you're an EU, or all of US if you're a US player. So if you find that DB region market average is a good number to use in your price source for whatever items are fitting in the group, then you can just use it and average it in this sort of way. But I know a lot of people are going to find DB region market average might be quite a bit higher than the number than your DB market, than your specific server. If you're on a very high populated server, you're going to find DB market, prices are going to be more aggressive on your server. DB market will be lower, and DB region market could be a little too high. So averaging them in this sort of way could pull the numbers up too high for you, and you might need them a little bit lower. So there's different ways you can adjust or accommodate for that. So one way that you could value region market values a little bit less but still include them as a stability function is reduce the value of them that you're going to be including in your average. So you still see what I had originally is the 80, the 100, and 125 dB market, but it's still including in it numbers related to region, which are very stable and they're not going to fluctuate a lot, but it's just putting a lower percentage to it to kind of keep it down a bit so it's more reflective of what's going on your server. And I find I have to do stuff like this a lot on my servers because I play on very high populated servers and very aggressive, and I like having the stability function of DB region market average, but I got to be careful that it's not pulling my numbers too high because I need to remain competitive to my server. So I like the stability, but I usually got to pull their percentage down, and there's another way that you can do this as well. I'll show you that now. Now, another way that you can kind of get around that issue is just to include the source that you really, really want to use. You can put it in there a couple times. So you see I have DB market in there 3 times. So you can pop it in there 2 or 3 times, whatever. And then you still have the DB region market average in here. So what that's doing, it's going to average up all of these 4 numbers. And because 3 of those numbers are all DB market, your final overall number that TSM is going to be getting for minimum price is going to be really close towards DB market, which is numbers specific to your server. But then you still have that stability function of DB region market average. And if you find that after you get this done and your overall range that you have for the items in this group, if you find that your price is still a little bit too high and you still find that DB region market average is still pulling your numbers a little bit higher than you want, is still having more of an effect that you want, you can reduce that by putting like 60% here, 70% there, 80% there. You can kind of pull down the weight that it has on your final overall number, but still have the stability function in there if you want it. If you don't want to use DB region market average for an operation for a particular group, if you just find it doesn't work and you don't want it, just don't put it in there. You don't have to. Now things get a little bit more interesting when you start referencing your average buy price or your crafting cost. So before I get into that, I need to explain something. If you don't understand anything of what I'm going to explain in this next piece, your takeaway point is going to be never sell anything lower then 106% of your average buy price or crafting cost. 105% is not safe. Okay, I want to cover a little bit of math because I want to explain something to you, and this is something I know some people get confused with, so I want to make sure you guys get this. So if you buy something at 100,000 gold and you sell it at 110% of your average buy price, it's going to be posted on the auction house for 110,000 gold. So then you take off your auction house cut 5%, which is 5,500 gold. So then you take your 110,000 gold and you minus your auction house cut, and in the end you get 104,500 gold, which is 4,500 gold profit. Okay, that looks good, fine, we're happy with that. Now, if we look at the 105% scenario, it doesn't look as good. So you buy something at 100,000 gold, you sell it at 105% of your average buy price, so it gets posted on the auction house for 105,000 gold. So your auction house cut 5% of that 105,000 gold is actually 5,250 gold. So if you take your 105,000 gold, you subtract off your auction house cut of 5,250, that's going to leave you with an overall price of 99,000 gold 750. So that means that you're actually going to lose gold if you ever sell anything at 105% of your average buy price or 105% of your crafting costs. You're going to be losing gold. So 105 is not safe. So where is the safe point? Where is the break-even spot? Okay, so the break-even spot where you don't lose gold is going to be 1 divided by 0.95 minus 1, which is 0.0526, blah, blah, blah. So never use anything lower than 105.26, blah, blah, blah. Or you can just go with 106%. So 106% is safe, 105% is not safe. So in my profile, I use 106% because it's less confusing for people and absolutely safe, and you won't lose gold. However, if you're more inclined, you can write your custom prices to account for this. Either way is fine. Do it how you want. So for those of you who want to see it the other way, here it is. So if you want to break even, your minimum price should be average buy divided by 0.95. So that's going to take into account your 5% auction house cut, and then when you do sell the item, you're going to get back 100,000 gold even. So you're not losing any gold, you're not making any gold, but you're not losing any gold. So that's your break even point. So if you want to make at least 5% profit, then you would have to use 105% average buy divided by 0.95. And then once your auction house cut is taken into account, once your item sells, you're going to end up with 105,000 gold. So you'll have 5,000 gold profit. So you're getting your 5% profit. Alright guys, with TSM you have maximum functions and minimum functions. Both are really great. So this is an example of a maximum function. So what a maximum function is going to do is TSM will come up with a number for each individual item within the bracket, and whichever one is highest is going to be the one that TSM is going to use. So TSM will look at what you bought a particular item for, and it will do 106% of that price you bought it for. And then it's also going to look at the market value for it on your server, and it'll use 60%. Now, whichever one of those is highest is going to be the number that it uses here for a minimum price, and then it's going to do the same thing down here for the rest of these. So because this is the way it is, it ends up being a protective function. This average buy is a protective function. So TSM is always going to end up using this average buy price is always going to be the maximum price, unless the number for DB market is higher than 106% of average buy, meaning you're never ever going to sell anything for less than what you bought it for, taking into account your auction house cut. So you could even drop this down to as low as 20%. It doesn't matter. You're never ever going to lose gold, because whichever one of these is the highest is the one it's going to use. So this one here is always going to be highest until this number here gets higher than 106% of your average buy price. This is a very good protective function. So like I said, you can drop these down to like really low prices. So if you're buying things on Sniper and you're buying them for 5, 10, 20% of DB market, of market value, you can turn around and go flip them, throw them back up on the auction house, and you can be very aggressive with your prices and be very competitive and sell them for like 20% less than market value. It's going to sell right away. You're going to easily get rid of that material that you bought and move on, and you can keep flipping and keep selling more things. So it works out really, really well. If you don't want to be as aggressive as this, you can pull up your numbers a little bit more, but you still get your protective function, so you're never going to lose gold. So if you want to sell things off quickly, you can drop these numbers down a little bit lower. If you're willing to wait it out and you don't mind posting it a bunch of times, well, then you're going to want these percentages to be a little bit higher. Now, for those of you that prefer using the divided by 0.95 instead of the 106%, if you'd rather do it that way, this is how that would look. So your minimum price right here is you would be willing to sell it here for exactly what you bought it for. There's no profit at all included right here, so you'll never lose anything taking into account your auction house, but you might not make profit if you had this particular function. So if you wanted to guarantee profit, you could put in 101% profit for your lowest possible price. You could do it that way. So that's only 1% profit. If you want a 5% profit, you could do 105%. So that's the other way of writing what I had just done previously. It's the same, it'll come out the same. Well, pretty close to the same. All right, the same sort of deal applies with crafting the same way it worked with average buy price. So you do the same sort of thing. You can do it this way, 106% of crafting, 60% DB market. Again, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to look for the highest price, and 106% of crafting is always going to be your highest price until the number for here is higher than 106. So you're never going to be selling anything for less than crafting costs using something like this. And again, same sort of deal. You can drop this down to 20%, you can drop this down to 50%, totally up to you, and you're never going to be selling anything for less than crafting cost. All right, so this is the other way to write what I had just showed you a second ago. So again, same sort of deal. You've got crafting, this is your crafting cost. So you're not going to be making any gold right here, but you won't be losing any gold taking into account your auction house cut. But you probably want yourself to get a little bit of gold. So 101% of crafting, so you'd get 1% there. You could change it to 5%, which is fine. So again, you still have your protective function here. You're never going to be selling anything for less than crafting cost because you've got your max function in here. And the same deal, you can still drop that down to 20. You can drop that down to 50. It would make it very, very competitive. You'd never lose any gold, and you'd always be selling stuff for more than crafting cost. All right, if you think about the market where people go out to various vendors, pick up pets, transmogs, recipes, all that kind of sort of stuff, you can set up operations with TSM to take into account the price that you actually buy those vendor pets, vendor stuff from the vendors. It'll account for that price, so you can use vendor buy to reference that. But then if you think about some of the kittens and stuff that you buy in the vendor, some of them only cost like a few copper, a few silver. You don't want to go to the auction house and sell that stuff for 2 gold, because that's a big waste of your time to run around and pick up all the stuff for like 2 gold profit. That's craziness. So you can set up TSM to tell it, what's the minimum price you want to let this stuff go for. So using a function like this, it's going to look at your vendor buy price. And again, we're using max, so this is something you're familiar with now. So because I have 10 gold in there, it's never going to sell any of these vendor pets for under 10 gold. So I'll never ever be wasting my time selling stuff for really, really cheap. And then if you go look at the normal price, it'll sell it for whichever one is highest of my vendor buy 100 gold, which usually it's going to be the 100 gold. And then for the maximum price, again, they're mostly going to be referencing the gold number, because the vendor buy price for a lot of this stuff is copper, silver, it's nonsense. So this is one way that you can kind of make your operations and make them worth your time to deal with selling them on the auction house. So this is the other way that you could write this particular operation. Again, you've got your vendor buy divided by 0.95. So you would not be making any profit with this if you left it as is, in the case that this vendor pet you were buying was above 10 gold. If it was under 10 gold, it's completely fine to leave it like this, but we know that there are some pets that are above 10 gold. So just to make sure that you're actually making profit for the time you're spending running around getting those, you should at least have this 101, but we'll put 105% here because 1% profit. I would like you guys to get a little bit more than that. So 105% vendor buy, and there you go. That's another way that you could write that operation if you prefer it that way. All right, so this is an example here where you can start to put together all the different bits and pieces of things that you've learned from stuff I've just talked about. So let's go through this and I'll explain what it's doing. So what this is using is it's using a first function, and what that does is it will first look at the very first item in the bracket that's coming after the first, and as long as there is a number that comes from whatever that source is, it will use it. But if that's not a valid source or there isn't a number that comes from it, then it will go use whatever is next in the list. And if that's valid, it will use it. If it's not valid, it'll go to whatever is next on the list. So you can force TSM to look at pricing sources in a specific order that you may want. So what this is doing here, let's go through the first little section. First is looking at the maximum of crafting cost average buy. So whichever of these two numbers are higher is going to be the number that it uses. So if this item cannot be crafted or you've never bought this item, then it's not going to have a number for any of this. So it's going to skip this whole section. It's going to go on to the next parameter. So then it's going to look at what you've previously sold this item for, and it will come up with a number for that. But if you've never sold the item before, then it's not going to have this data to look at, so it's not going to be able to come up with anything for that. So then the next thing it's going to do is it's going to go look at 80% of market value. Now you're always going to have a number for market value if you have your desktop application set up, so you've got something that's for sure always going to work. But sometimes, you might have an operation applied to a group where it might not be, you probably can't even craft it, or you've never bought it, or, you've never sold it before. You've got to back up something that'll work. So that's an example of how you can use a first function to force TSM to look at different sources in a certain order to fit whatever it is you're trying to do. All right, so when you're building these custom price sources, sometimes when you're just starting and getting into TSM, you're not really sure what's going to work or what's best. So it's a bit of trial and error in the beginning. So it's really important when you're at that stage to have everything turned on in your tooltips. So as you're building your custom price source, you can just go look at the items in your group, hover your mouse over them, and see if what you came up with, see if it's working or not, or see if there needs to be adjustments made. So to do that, go up to options and you'll see tooltip options down here, and you'll want to go into all of these different subgroups and turn things on so they're showing up in your tooltips. So let's go look at herbs for an example. And something I didn't actually mention earlier is you can apply multiple different operations to a single group. So if you want to post multiple different stack sizes and things like that, you can do it. You can just put one operations or up to 5, up to you. Comes in handy sometimes, especially if you want to build walls, but we're not going to talk about walls today. So we're hovering our mouse over one of our herbs here in the group, and we're just going to look at what TSM is coming up with for our price range. So our minimum, normal, maximum price, you can see sort of there at the bottom, 10 gold up to 30 gold. That's kind of the range. That's the range that TSM is going to be willing to sell this particular herb at, and I have to decide if I'm happy with that. Do I think that's an appropriate range, or does it need to be tweaked? And in order to know whether or not that's a good range, you got to look at market value, see what the market value is on your server, what number it's coming up with, and see if that number fits somewhere around that range, if it makes sense. You could see market value for this particular herb over the last couple days has actually been a little bit lower. It's only been about 10 gold market value, so that would be a little bit under. So I could go in and I could try to pull down my minimum price a little bit if I wanted to. And then you can also look at minimum buyout, which is what it's currently on the auction house. The last time it did its update like 30 minutes ago. So it's actually selling for 20 gold on my auction house right now. So right now, this auctioning operation is working out really, really good. I don't actually need to adjust anything, but if the price of the herbs came down to like 10 gold, I'd probably have to make some adjustments here. So if you did need to make some adjustments, you could go into your minimum price. You could pull that up or down if it needed to go up or down, if you liked it or didn't like it. And then your normal price, if you felt like it was okay, well then leave it where it is. If you felt like it needed to come up a little bit, pull up the percentages a bit for your normal price. If you want it to come down, pull it down. And then with your maximum price, if you thought that was just way too high and you want it to be down a little bit more, then pull down your percentages. If you thought it should be higher, then pull up your percentages. So it's a bit of trial and error when you're building these custom price sources, especially in the beginning. Make sure when you're building them, before you go to the auction house, just to post stuff really quickly, check and see if the operations you came out with, check and see if you like them, check and see if they make sense, see if they fit the market value of what it is, what's going on in your server, and the items you're trying to sell. Because you don't want to sell stuff for way too cheap, and you also don't want to sell stuff for way too expensive, because if it's on the auction house for way too much gold, you're never going to be moving your product and you're never going to be making profit. So you got to make sure that your price range is competitive and you're going to be able to actually make some profit, because that's the whole point of all of this. So once you have set up all your selling rules for your operations and you're happy with them, posting lots of auctions is very easy to do. Simply walk to your auction house, click on the auctioning tab, and select whatever groups you want to post with. So if you just wanted to post some tailoring and leatherworking stuff and that's all you had in your bags, you could just select the two groups that applies to whatever it is you're trying to sell and then hit start post scan. Right now on this particular tune, I have a little bit of everything in a bunch of different groups. So I'm going to select all of my groups and I'm going to hit start post scan. So what TSM is going to do in this situation is going to look at all the items in my bags, and it's going to look at all the operations that I've assigned to these items and look at my lowest possible price that I'm willing to sell stuff at and my highest possible price. So whenever the auctions on the auction house that other people have posted, when they're within that range, then it's going to undercut those. But there's going to be some situations where things are outside of that range. So whenever other people have auctions posted that are really, really cheap, TSM is going to look at what I told it to do in those situations. When below minimum price, what do you want to do? And then you could select, you could post it at normal price, you could post it at minimum price, or you could not post it. Totally up to you. Whatever settings you had applied is what it's going to use here. And then on the opposite end of things, when other people have auctions on the auction house and they're really, really expensive and they're way above your maximum price, it's going to look at what you told TSM what you want to do in that situation. Do you want to post it at normal price, or do you want to post it at maximum price? So TSM has a lot of thinking to do with everything that's in your bags, looking at what the current price is on the auction house that other people have, and decide what it needs to do to fit the rules that you gave it. So now that it's done scanning, it's ready to post 127 auctions, which I can do very quickly just by rolling my mouse scroll wheel. So that's TSM auctioning in a nutshell. Sorry if it was information overload. It will just come with time and practice. You can build on this knowledge to get much more creative and get into some really complex and advanced functions, but what has been covered in this video is more than sufficient to take care of all of your gold making needs. If you did see my old auctioning video, which is now gone, let me know if this one was better. Happy gold making, thanks for watching.